Good afternoon. I hope this all is well on this fine and beautiful day. I wanted to talk today about the simple act of seeing, of noticing, of paying attention. And if you've been paying attention to me before, you see that I've moved my camera and desk and computer. I was back behind, not I pointed there. I was right in front of those two pictures, and now I've moved across the room, and we'll see how this is for lighting and sound. But it opens up the room more, and I don't have so many wires. There was no outlet close to the previous placement, and I had wires everywhere, so now I'm real close to the outlets here. It's a much neater, tidier. So we'll see. Change is good. But what prompts me to share today is the importance of paying attention. Having lived in a foreign country for 21 years, and without, unfortunately, developing much language skill, my ability with Chinese is extremely limited. But I survive by simply paying attention, simply watching, as the witness has always been an integral part of who I am. This witness can be put to other tasks. The witness primarily has been about evaluating, offering insight along the spiritual path. But along the way, I put it to work simply as an observer, simply watching. So the witness became the watcher. Still not a doer. Not in his job skill set. But how important it is for me in my daily life to observe. I watch what other people do. If I can't read anything in Chinese, how do I know what to do, when to do it? How do I know going into a restaurant that is all in Chinese? How do I know what to order? Well, like everything else, my survival skills have been couched in my luckiness. I'm a lucky fellow, always have been. So I'm lucky that I landed to a place that's tolerant. That, although certainly not pleased with my lack of language skills, able and willing to accommodate me. And I learned long ago not to burden those I'm fortunate enough to have around, but maybe unfortunately for them, by asking the native speakers of Chinese, by asking them to do my work. It's my responsibility to learn the language. I'm not at all handicapped by my inability, because I'm more than make up for it with other things. Number one, I'm extremely couched. I've studied this culture. I've lived amongst these people for 20 years, 21 years, and I don't sequester myself. I'm out and about in the rush of things, in the daily life. And I don't surround myself like many expats, many foreigners, many strangers in a strange land surround themselves with the familiar. I mean, it's a familiar language and people that you can talk with. You sort of sequester. I see people sequester. They get together in small groups and speak English to each other and go everywhere and do everything together. Well, somehow that never appealed to me, and always had predominantly local friends. Recently, the last couple of years, my brother's been here with me. He's making a concerted effort to learn Chinese, so we'll see how that goes. Sometimes in the fervor of being a newcomer, I include myself, the fervor of being a newcomer, that you don't quite see how daunting a task Chinese language acquisition is to an untempered, an untrained, an ear that's educated to a completely different sound pattern. We're rewarded at birth. I understand from my studies of language acquisition that a baby is capable of the first year of making any sound that a human can make, but quickly eliminates those that don't get the attention of a parent, and thereby pretty much losing the ability to hear, to replicate certain sounds. And believe me, there's many sounds that to my ear are as foreign as it can get. Can't get there from here, as somebody used to say. This always puzzled me when people told me, oh, you can't get there from here. Okay. Well, you can learn the language with the elimination of sounding, articulating abilities. They're simply gone. But what I have noticed is that people who are musically inclined, because this language is tone-based, 4 tones essentially, it's tone-based, so that if you have a good musical ear, you can catch the tones. And if you're tone deaf, like me, I can hum along to a great song, but that's about the extent of my vocalizing abilities. So what I've noticed is that people that have learned the language, it didn't seem necessarily to be about effort, because I've known people that have tried very hard. So this obstacle, well, seeming obstacle, how can I live here for so long without being fluent, or without having even the most basic communicating skills? How do I survive? And it's by watching. Simple observation. And it's the accumulation of this ability to watch, to witness, that the same ability that saw me so well through my spiritual inquisition, my spiritual inquiry, my spiritual surge, to listen, to weigh, to evaluate, to gather, sort, file. And I have to say that because I'm such a creature of habit, once I find a favorite place and a food that I like, I seldom will change it. So simply showing up in many restaurants that are familiar with me, that have seen me before, I don't even have to order. The same? Yeah, the same. Keep it simple. Yeah. So that served me well, that I'm content. A little stronger than content. It seems necessary for me to limit my gastronomical experiments. There's foods that feed my body, and I stick to them. Don't get bored, because I don't look at food as a great adventure. It's more about sustaining. How does the consumption of each food resonate with me? So this ability to watch, to observe, has always served me well, and I would seriously recommend that you sharpen your skills. And part of it is, by necessity, keeping an open mind. Never settle or never fall into the trap of thinking that you have any clue of what's going on with you, much less around you. Bring that innocence of childhood. Maintain that innocence. Maintain that purity. Look how quickly a child can be joyful. Be that child. And be a child tempered by experience. Tempered, honed, sharpened by the experiences that life brings your way. One must learn from missteps. One must practice forgiveness for those around you, but most importantly, for yourself. Few people spend any energy or time or even grasp the concept that forgiveness for oneself is possible. We spend much of our lives, don't we, in regret for perceived mistakes. And once you live long enough, you see that sometimes that what seemed like a mistake somehow through serendipity worked out to be much less than a mistake. Sometimes I've stumbled onto something that it almost seemed like I had a plan, even though that having a plan was the farthest thing from my mind. It just worked. So this listening, this tuning in to the song of the universe on the grandest level, this tuning in from the grandest level of the sound of the universe, the song of the universe, all the way to the mundane, day-to-day necessities of life. Feeding yourself, sheltering yourself, The same ear, that hears the song of the universe also hears the needs, the day-to-day, the less than glamorous needs of the body. So listening serves the soul, serves the spirit, it serves the body. I just can't overemphasize. And simply listen. By this I mean simply observe, simply watch. When you don't bring your preconceived notions to the table, you discard, you leave all that behind. You listen and you watch with the innocence and the honesty of a child. One of the nicest compliments that my teacher ever graced me with was that he loved my ability to retain the innocence, the purity of childhood, of children. He asked me before, how did you survive 60-something years at that point and still remain unsullied by events, people, thoughts, occasions, not only self-propagated, but sourced from the others around you. How did you maintain this innocence? And probably the biggest part of this ability has been letting go of judgment, to see everything each day with fresh eyes, to see something that's been repeated ad infinitum as new and fresh. So there you go. Just watch. In simplicity, just notice. I like the word notice because notice doesn't carry with it, at least for me, any baggage of any judgmental baggage. If you notice something, it's usually without bias. You bring nothing to the table that would influence what you're noticing. So you can notice behaviors of others. You can notice yourself. How do you react to? Watch yourself. How do you react in different given situations? I always would tell my girls, when I say girls, I'm talking about my students, university students. They're asking how I evaluate this guy, if he's a good guy or not a good guy, and because they're skilled at watching. This is what they do. They watch us, and they're watching us to see if we're all that we seem, what we really are. And I would always tell them that you watch somebody, the real measure of a man is, or a woman, the real measure of a person is when you perceive to be in a losing position. And as Personal experience, 90% of the time, I failed at what I thought I was trying to achieve, or I deemed my efforts less than stellar. I deemed my efforts pretty much a failure. But that meant that 10% of the time, I was doing at least okay. And I don't know about you, but I find solace in that 10%. It's my sanctuary. 10%, thank the stars that I've been fortunate enough to enjoy that 10%. And then you look at the other 90% as opportunity. An opportunity to simply notice, to be with your perceived failures and shortcomings. Just be with them, just experience them, just embrace them. And then the process of forgiveness begins. And my experience has shown me that if everything starts here, it starts here and somehow ends here. That's the beauty of this cosmic cycle. You go inwards and to come outwards. And then you discover that there is no inwards, there's no outwards. It's all the same. So it starts here. This is not selfishness. This is all that you have. You can't really change anything out there. You really have a very, very limited sphere of influence on any of those around you, any of those events around you. The one person, the one entity that you have at least a sliver of hope to influence in a positive, constructive way is oneself, yourself. That's all there is. So forgiveness for others has to begin, like everything else, begin here. Forgive yourself, love yourself, learn from yourself, teach yourself. More importantly, question yourself. When the mind is taking too much control, this is the time to doubt. One of the easiest things that comes the most smoothly off my tongue is, I doubt it. I doubt it. Yeah. And this has been useful. This has allowed me to evaluate, ruminate, meditate. Think about what is so for me. What's the answers to my questions? I had so many questions until one day I had no more. I guess I ran out of questions. Somehow, to my personal great relief, I had no more questions. And that's remained with me ever since that momentous day. It's been several years ago now. And ironically, when I was in the presence of my teacher, I had a chance to ask someone who just might know. And I had no questions. He would ask me, do you have any questions? And I'd say, no, I have no questions. I'm a man without questions. And he would smile and nod. So I never was quite sure what he thought about my failure to take advantage of this opportunity. But somehow, judging by the little smile on his face, I'm certain he understood. He was never one to endorse. He was never one to say, well, that's good that you don't have questions. That's good that you doubt. That's good. He never endorsed any kind. He just let you develop. He lived as an example. But he let you. His teachings were simplicity in itself. But he led you. He led you to the cliff. He led you to the abyss. And he simply said, jump. And the rest is up to you. How far you need to fall? Who knows? Anybody? How long do you fall? It's anybody's game. How hard do you hit? Again, that's anybody's guess. But back to my girls, my students. How did their prospective boyfriend behave when all was not well in his world? When he was losing? That's the measure of a man. How well we take defeat. And it's an irony to me that some of us don't take defeat very well because we inured to it. We're so much defeated. It's so many turns, or at least it seems to be defeated. And then the ultimate defeating of the ego, when all that you held dear has to be discarded. The long, dark night, longer for others, longer for some than others. That long, dark night when you surrender up. It depends on how much you had vested in your Maya, your personal egocentric Maya, your personal ego-driven definition of the world, vision of the world. How painful was that to give up? For me, it wasn't painful. I had dark nights, but that's because I felt so utterly alone upon awakening as a baby discarded on a dirty sidewalk and had to fend for myself that first couple years. No one was there as it should be. That's the long dark night of solitude, the surrender, the forgiveness that leads to surrender, that leads to recognition of the Maya, of the illusion that you are anything other than what one and all is. No separation, no boundaries. It's inclusive, not exclusive. And all this can be, the process begins with watching. And I'm going to go into a little more about watching and learning to dismiss, to doubt, to evaluate, to file, sort, store, to take information through knowledge, through the portals of knowledge to wisdom. Just the other night I had a dream about a portal, and I stuck my head in there, and this is the portal of bliss, I discovered. Now I know that if I open this portal, if I go in there, I can be overwhelmed in the constant state of bliss. There's a portal bliss. I recently discovered it. But all I can do, like I said, poke my head out, get a little dose of bliss. But I don't have the tools. I'm not equipped to dwell in bliss while maintaining this physical form. And I'm not done with it. I'm still working to do what I can to promote the evolution of all sentient beings. I have no grandiose vision that I will affect the multitudes. In fact, I'm more than satisfied that there's a handful that might look to me for some guidance. There's a handful that might watch, but simply observe my behavior. Because it's this observation, this is the real teaching. It's never been what you say. It's never been what you do. It's always been and always been, will be what you are. People can see in the simplest, purest sense. And people can begin to understand that far from being extraordinary, the beauty truly lies in the ordinariness of this condition of awakened, of abiding awakening. And awakening, I like that because it's an ing. It's a continuation that never stops. It's always unfolding. There's always more. There's always progress. There's always the spiral to infinity. But all of this to go for a circle, full circle, and come down, simply watching, simply observing, simply witnessing. And subjecting all that you've watched, all that you've witnessed, all that you have listened to the rigorous self-scrutiny fueled by doubt. I learned early to question authority. I doubted what anyone told me until I could incorporate it in experientially, until I could live the truth, until I could be the truth. Then, just as questionings abandoned me earlier, so too with doubt. I have no doubt of the simplicity, of the ordinariness, of the unified, non-divisive, non-dualistic nature of our existence. It makes me smile. It makes my heart warm. It makes me even believe that I can open that portal, that bliss portal, and stick my head out for a little more than nanoseconds. Maybe I could have a second or 2 seconds of bliss. Wouldn't that be fine?